Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here of the Raptors Digest. Riker, we have some off-season news. The rumor mill is swinging around, and obviously the trade, or what's it? The NBA draft, when trades can pick up, slowly approaching, and we're getting Raptors rumors trickling down, and one of them is pretty interesting, and it involves Chris Boucher ending up with the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets are interested in signing or trading for Chris Boucher. Obviously, the Raptors are going to pick up his $7 million team option after this tremendous season that he's had. Obviously, the Nets want all of the best players in the NBA, and they can't have their infinity gauntlet of NBA players without Chris Boucher on their roster. Riker, is there any way that a trade could work between the Nets and the Raptors involving Chris Boucher?
And you'd have to really get creative with it. You'd maybe have to pick up.
Fingers going.
You'd maybe have to pick up some team options that we were very much confident were going to not get picked up. Guys like Rodney Hood, Aaron Baines, and it'd all be on the assumption that they're willing to sign and pay out or sign and cut guys just to make the trade sort of balance and get back Boucher, right? So if I'm Brooklyn, maybe I'm saying I'll pick up a couple of dud contracts, Rodney Hood, Aaron Baines, Stanley Johnson, whoever. Stanley Johnson obviously up, sign and trade, whatever. It might get weird, but maybe you're willing to take on a couple of these weird contracts, figure out what to do with them to acquire Chris Boucher. Then you can start getting into more interesting talks about an actual one-for-one trade, because guys that you'd be interested in as a Toronto Raptors organization: Joe Harris, $17 million. Dinwiddie, player option, $12 million. Landry Shamet, $3.7. There's a couple of guys there, right? But they're nowhere near, or they're way higher or way lower than Chris Boucher's $7 million. So you have to get creative to make this work, Ben. What jumps out to you?
Well, you named players that I'd be interested in, and obviously Kyrie, James Harden, and Kevin Durant would be three players I'm most interested in, but I think we can jump over those players just to start off. And the first name I think we should bring up is Spencer Dinwiddie, as he's a guy that this NBA trade deadline was linked to the Toronto Raptors by multiple accounts, multiple reports. People are saying that Norman Powell could potentially go to the Brooklyn Nets in return for a Spencer Dinwiddie. Obviously, you and I just hated the idea of that deal. We thought it was disgusting. We thought it was absurd. Now, who knows, maybe the Raptors are just very high on Spencer Dinwiddie, because he is a guy, and I've said this a lot, I spoke about this to death during the NBA trade deadline, is he averaged 21 points per game for one season, not this year, but the season prior, or the season prior to getting injured. So he could be a really interesting guy to bring back, specifically if Kyle Lowry is gone. If we assume Kyle Lowry's going to be moving on and he picks up this team option, obviously, if he doesn't pick up player option, then we could just maybe sign him in free agency without worrying about letting go of Chris Boucher, because the Raptors do have cap space this summer, right? That 2021 offseason, we saved all that money for Giannis. It could just end up going to Dinwiddie, but if he picks up that player option and you really value him highly and you're letting go of Kyle Lowry, I wouldn't mind Spencer Dinwiddie coming in as a backup point guard. Now, would I want to give up Boucher for Dinwiddie? That's a whole nother question.
Yes. Oof. Lot to unpackage there. But cap space is one thing, because we're not certain what's going to happen with Kyle Lowry. And I have this nagging, dreadful feeling that the Raptors might sign him, that they just might sign him and keep him.
Dreadful feeling.
This nagging, terrible, dreadful feeling. If you could sign for $15 million and play him off the bench, do it. But if you are signing this guy at $22 million to start him again alongside Fred, it just doesn't make sense. So potentially, hopefully, you're dropping his contract, and you're obviously not picking up Rodney Hood, $10 million, Aaron Baines, $7 million. You're going to pay Gary Trent Jr. probably in excess of 20, so there still is, like you said, room to sign. Rashawn Holmes complicates that a bit. So I don't know actually how much cap space we really have to work with after you prioritize who you're going to pick up. But Spencer Dinwiddie interests me because, as you said, he's an actual backup point guard that's put up good stats as your backup point guard. Now, his best season, obviously, is when he had 49 games starting for that bad Brooklyn Nets team. Similar stats to what Siakam had this season, Colin Sexton had. I'm bringing up these guys to show that 20 points per game is not actually that impressive, but on decent splits. And so, yeah, to bring in Dinwiddie, if you do lose Fred and if you don't think that Malachi is ready right away, that'd be a good pickup. But Ben, I'd be more interested in bringing in multiple guys, Claxton, Joe Harris, and who knows, maybe Shamit, if we look at those three as a package. Is that unrealistic?
Yeah, well, just to finish off the point on Dinwiddie, I'd still value Boucher on this Toronto Raptors roster over Dinwiddie, specifically as Dinwiddie's coming off an ACL injury. He's a guy that, obviously, he's not necessarily known for his flashy dunks or insane athleticism, but he's definitely not just a low, slow to the ground shooting guy. Like, explosiveness is a part of his game, so we don't know how that will potentially affect him going forward. That's one thing to look at. I tore my ACL. It's a tough thing to come back from. Some people do it really well, some people don't. So that's a risk. That's a risk there. Boucher, he's not coming off of any serious injuries. And defensively, the Raptors are very light on big men right now. And we're losing Baines. I think that's we'll probably retire this insurance pylon cone for next season. But we want to bring Birch back. We don't know at which contract. He's the only really true big man at this point on the roster. Gillespie, people always say in the comment section he's a power forward. We've been playing him mostly at center. I don't care what he's listed at on Basketball Reference, but still, he's an undersized player, right? And Boucher, he just is really our most offensively talented big. So even if Dinwiddie has that higher ceiling, right? If you can get 20 points per game coming off your bench, that'd be great. But it's a little bit of a risk, and you're giving up a hole where you're very weak at currently in the construction of the roster for an area that you're pretty good at. You know, Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., Malachi Flynn is a potential decent backup, right? We saw Jalen Harris show out during the offseason. We have a plethora of wings that could play that position. I don't know. The Raptors have holes everywhere, but the center position, power forward, is a tough space.
Let me interject that if you are saying you're going to trade Chris Boucher, it is 100% under the assumption that you know exactly what you're doing in the offseason to fix up your center spot. You're not trading him and then figuring it out. It has to be drilled down, 100% confirmed. You got Rashawn Holmes. You maybe got some sort of scoring big that we haven't. Yeah, Evan Mobley. Maybe you got some sort of Christian Wood trade deal that is yet to break yet. You got your center spot down pat, Ben, and you're guaranteed it's going to be the best front court in the NBA. Then you make a move on Chris Boucher, because if you don't have those pieces in place, you're only trading for guards, small forwards with the Brooklyn Nets. You don't want Blake Griffin. I know you're going to bring it up. You don't want Blake Griffin. There's no other bigs on that team. DeAndre Jordan's a joke. So, you know, you're going to make trades for sort of 1 through 3 spot with the Brooklyn Nets. So you'd have to already have everything else locked in.
Yeah. Well, you brought his name up. Blake Griffin. You're just writing him off. You don't want him at all on this squad.
This is my writing animation. What do you call animations that are in person? Just
you writing, bro.
That's me writing them off. He's way off.
He's been good. Defensively, he's been an asset for the Brooklyn Nets. His athleticism seems to be coming back upwards. Is on the upward swing. He's getting a few dunks now. He postered Giannis at one point. I don't know. He's also a free agent, so if you want to make the money work, you could potentially do a sign and trade with Boucher, but he's just a guy I'd be interested in the offseason in general. But I digress. I don't think a trade is going to happen. You definitely don't trade Boucher. Certainly not Boucher for Blake Griffin. But we'll talk away from that, because you brought up a package earlier, and obviously the most intriguing guy that would potentially be tradable on the Brooklyn Nets is Joe Harris. Sniper. We played against him in the playoffs back in 2014. He was breaking our hearts back then. So we know what he can do from behind the three-point arc. Obviously, he's at a $17 million contract. There's also other players that maybe you could make a big package with for the Brooklyn Nets. But let's just talk about Joe Harris first. We did the direct Spencer Dinwiddie Boucher comparison. What's your direct Joe Harris Boucher comparison? Because I think that's a little bit closer, because Joe Harris has a surefire NBA skill at, tops of the league. And it's an area that the Raptors certainly this season could have improved in. He'd be a nice player to bring off the bench and just fire up those threes.
Yeah, Matt Thomas, right? but actually good. 2 seasons in the NBA, 2 full entire seasons played, almost every single game, shooting 47%, 47.5% from 3. That's crazy stats to almost shoot flush from 3. So to bring in a guy like that, that is flush, dead center down the middle. I mean, that would be great, but again, you'd have to kind of hide him on defense. You'd have to find a way for that to work. My other also, I need to bring up, so he's 6'6", so he's not terrible. Like, he has better length than our shooters of past.
Yep.
Does Basketball Reference come up with these nicknames on their own? They're saying that his nicknames as Joey Hoops, that's fine,
okay,
and Beef Jerky Joe. What? Where is that coming from? I've never heard this man called Beef Jerky Joe in my life. I don't think he should be. Nobody has any business to call him that.
Beef
but
Jerky Joe. Bring him in for that nickname. Trade Trent, trade OG, bring in Beef
the sponsorship potential is already, the gears are turning. But Ben, let me throw this question back to you. Is that he is right now the longest guaranteed contract on the Brooklyn Nets. Mm-hmm. And the Brooklyn Nets seem to have a clear fire path to the NBA championship. Maybe almost as listen, maybe almost certain that they're going to win the NBA championship. This guy, he's not a negative asset. He's not a negative piece to have out there on the court. Why would you want to trade him? If you already have him locked in, you're already basically that championship team. You don't need any other pieces to bring you above the line. What does bringing in Boucher do for you that having Joe Harris around with no threat of him leaving do for you better? Like, what reason would Brooklyn Nets have to trade Joe Harris?
One word. Defense. If the Brooklyn Nets lose, it's because they couldn't do it. They couldn't put it together on the defensive end of the court. Obviously, they have all of the firepower they could potentially ask for in Kyrie, James Harden, and Kevin Durant. Joe Harris is just that icing, that cherry on top of that sundae. Kyrie's the cherry on top of the sundae. Joe Harris is just that kid sprinkling sugar, taking buckets of sugar and just pouring it all on top of that sundae because they're over flooded with offensive players.
Oh, what kind of sundaes you've been eating, man? I've never seen anybody put sugar on top of sundaes.
That's what these Brooklyn Nets are on the offensive end. It's defensively where the questions arise. Now, they started off as one of the worst defenses in NBA history. They came back to mid-level. Blake Griffin's been a big part of that, just being a mobile guy. Claxton as well. But Boucher, we know he's a shot blocker. We know he's mobile. We know he can play within a proper defensive system. So, yes, he's not the... You might even say in a vacuum, Joe Harris is a better player than Chris Boucher. Obviously, us as homers might just say, nah, Boucher's the guy. But defensively, like the assets, what this team needs, I could see why that deal could potentially go down. But maybe you could even get someone better than Boucher. Obviously, our hearts are melted with Boucher. We love his hustle. We love his energy. We don't know his actual trade value out there on the market because he really only has had one proven season. But I don't know. It'd be really interesting. I could see that being the reason why the Nets would accept a deal for Dinwiddie or Harris, or why they're targeting him in the first place.
What if they win the championship this year? Does your point still hold up?
No. Well, they're not going to try and break up the core if they win the championship. I don't imagine that.
Yeah, continuous improvement, I could understand, but I don't know. I agree with you that Joe Harris is the most likely to get moved because, you know, he has something that any NBA team would want, right? He's the 4th option, I guess, or the 5th option on that team. But if you win and he's around, why not keep him? That's my only thought. I hope Chris Boucher doesn't go to the Brooklyn Nets just because I don't like the Brooklyn Nets. Simple as that. Homer bias. Just don't want our man Boucher getting wasted as a 5th option, getting that easy win. We want Mr. Puma to stick around. So I'm just going to – that's my final point on this whole spiel. If we're going to trade, at least trade him to some other team where we can get back a superstar player.
I just want our Raptors to stay and develop and be superstars. So It sucks if this actually happens. I think it's still probably unrealistic, especially if they win the championship. But the rumors are out there, they're floating. We got to react to them, and there are some decent players the Raptors can get in return. So let us know in the comment section below what you think the Raptors should do. If the Brooklyn Nets are going hard after Boucher, should they just hang up on every phone call and say you guys are silly for asking for our players, or give them what they want and bring home some guys in return? Let us know in the comment section below. Check out the Instagram, the TikTok, all that cool stuff. Check out Courtside Digest, where we break down all of this stuff from an all-NBA perspective, with still a little bit of Raptors homerness. Do you have any last words on Chris Boucher, Riker? The old slingshot.
Cheers.